Lori, welcome to the stage. I'm so happy to get to talk to you today. Before we dive into questions, is there anything else you want our audience to know about you or anything else you want to share before we dive in?
No, not right now. I'll let you start with your questions.
Sounds good. All right, so I gave everybody kind of a bit of a primer on what Black women in technology is and a little bit about yourself. Would you share with us a little more of your journey and what it was like, what led to you starting Black women in technology?
Sure. As you noted, I went to Penn State to get my information systems degree. I was a non-traditional student. I was in my 30s. I had already been through a divorce. I was single with the children and already experienced the death of a child. So I was a typical adult learner who would go back to school or perform some other things to be able to feel like I'm getting myself together. So what I did, I increased and took a step forward to better my career, going from respiratory therapy to tech, which is something that I always wanted to do. I used to be a systems analyst over our respiratory therapy system and got really interested in that. My boss sent me to one class where I could take apart a computer and put it back together. And I thought, that's it. This is it. This is everything. This is what I want to do. And that started me off in 1996. So Black Women in Tech grew as a result of me being a graduate of Penn State. I looked at organizations that would fit me. I was a non-traditional student. Again, as I mentioned, I was a Black female. I had already had a career in doing another role, and I couldn't really seem to find an organization that catered to someone like me. So I mulled over Black women in technology for years before I started in 2014. So it wasn't a spontaneous thing in 2014 when I started it. It was something that I had thought about and mulled over for years before I made the decision to pull it all together.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm so sorry you had that experience of child loss. That is not something that anyone should ever go through. But thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I love how I always love when we hear stories like this of like, I thought about this for years. I finally pulled the trigger and look how it's turning out. Like I love hearing stuff like this. Um, would you share with us if there's been any kind of pivotal moment in your life that has sparked that passion for technology and innovation? Do you think this came from anywhere?
I think it did because I've worked in departments where I was the only Black female, the only one, and I was convinced that there was no reason for me to be the only one. The only reason would be that someone didn't know about the position. They didn't know what was involved in becoming a part of that. They just didn't know. So um, that became the pivotal part. Another thing that really stuck out to me was the economic value of switching careers. I had an increase of so much when I went over into tech than what I did as a respiratory therapist. So it lets you know that people that work in healthcare are not appreciated. But I will say it was a blessing for me and my family and my children because that's what was needed and that what is needed for women today, especially those career changers, those young people that are just starting out. These are the things that we need to consider. Taking these roles, working in these careers, there is a benefit that will benefit family and community.
Mhm. I love this. And you bring up a really good point, which is, as we're kind of trying to step into these spaces where either we are the only or we are one of the few, it is very important to kind of keep talking about that. Because it feels like I have felt in the past when I was in a room that was dominantly men, I needed to adjust myself to that room, right? And that's what I've done pretty much my entire working life till power fly. And I think that that is something that is absolutely at play when it comes to skin color in the workplace, unfortunately. And so it really kind of highlights that you don't know what you don't know what you don't know until you know it. But also kind of that importance for recognizing what somebody else's experience is like, because it's like, I talked about this on our last session too, but it's like if you're not part of a group that has ever felt like you've been somewhat excluded, it's very hard for you to like kind of understand this headspace or what that actually feels like. So I think that's really really wonderful, and it's so nice that you know you might have started as the only in a room, but clearly you are not satisfied with like not bringing other people up with you. You know what I mean? Clearly that is something that is very a part of your kind of ethos here.
It
Um,
is. It is. You got to
yeah.
pull, you can't go up alone.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
always have to pull somebody with you. So I'm pulling my sisters with me. That is what we are supposed to do in life.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm convinced of that. And there's no reason why they can't be in the room with me. I'm also convinced of that. No reason at all. And
Yeah.
that's what I preach.
Absolutely. All right. So throughout your career and obviously, your journey with Black women in tech for the last 10, I'm sure there's been some challenges, some hurdles, like there are going to be, especially when you're kind of trailblazing in your field. Would you want to share one of those with us? What that challenge was like and what helped you to overcome it?
Sure, there have been challenges, and one of the major challenges is being taken seriously and for things to not be constantly checked because of who you are. Someone always checking your work to make sure you did it correctly. Things like that. Those are challenges I think I still face. And I think we're going to face that for a while because of the inherent biases that exist. But it's something that you just have to let roll off your back. And when you get to the point where you can say to your superior, I really don't think you need to check my work anymore unless there's something that I'm forgetting. I really think you can trust me. I think until you can get to the point where you can express that, it's just water off a duck's back. You just have to just go through it. So that's one of the biggest challenges that I see, and the pushback for diversity and inclusion these days has been quite. Um, it's alarming to me. And I really do think that we really need to take the time to look at what D&I is supposed to mean before we jump up and down and say it's racially motivated and all of that.
Yeah. I mean, which is not like it never makes any sense to me. Like, so what if it is racially motivated? We still need it. It's still it doesn't somehow negate like the value of what we're like trying to achieve here. Yeah, I like that a lot. If y'all have an experience similar to Lori's, please chime in for us. Or if your lived experience is different, we'd love to hear from you. We have about 15 minutes left in this session. So if you have questions, please feel free to share them. We've got Power to Fly people in the chat who will grab those and bring them to us here in the main stage. So please feel free to ask questions. If you want us to go in deeper on a subject or something, please feel free. Y'all have the power to drive this conversation today. All right, we've talked a little bit about this already, but do you think that there is anything specific that drives your passion for empowering women and minorities in the tech space?
Well, specifically, I could say one is pretty easy because I am a woman and a minority.
Mhm.
Uh, and some of the things that I've seen over the years that have affected Black women in particular that I don't think is fair. And I'm convinced that Black women are incredibly intelligent, very affable, very skilled. And I really do think these are opportunities that we could take on, and be in those roles and do what we're supposed to do. Another thing I like to encourage women to do is to explore what you think you want to do. There's so much in technology these days. There's so much. I currently work, you mentioned I was a director. I've since become an analyst for a different organization. And there's so much to do. I'm still in the IS department. I'm a business analyst. I do IT things, and I'm not a programmer. I don't have a certificate in anything in particular. I just have my experience and my subject matter expertise. So I think we need to consider those things when it comes to taking a job in tech and not being afraid to make the transition.
I absolutely love that, you know, your answer also covers the fact that it's not just it's not just the accessibility of the tech space, it's the accessibility for what the tech space represents, right? It's that growth, it's that next thing. And so often the next thing is gate kept, right? It belongs to a certain group of people, and that's kind of all. And I very much like this. And as you were talking, honestly, I just kept hearing in my head Malcolm X's speech about the most neglected person in America is the Black woman. And I sadly that is still very true and does not need to be, should not be. And really kind of highlights that like the things that we want to fix and that we're fighting against have been in place a very long time. Obviously, that means change is not going to be fast, but that does not mean it's not valuable and that the work towards it doesn't need to start immediately, you know, if not sooner, right?
Right.
We talked a little bit about the future of DEI in tech and you know what you've been seeing recently and kind of the like backlash or some of the like you know the cutting of programs. How do you envision the future of diversity and inclusion within that sector, like realistically versus maybe what you would like to see?
Well, realistically, I think there's going to be some struggles. I think DEI was created as a result of what happened with George Floyd, which was cool and everything because we know what they were going for, but it's the first department to get cut when there's downsizing. So, what is the intent for diversity, equity, and inclusion when it comes to large companies? So, I think that needs to be vetted, and I really do think that needs to be studied. What I would like to see, I would like to see an even playing field. I would like to see if when resumes come across someone's desk and they see a name like LaQuisha, they don't throw it in the trash. That's what I would like to see. I would like to see the bias removed. I would like to see that women are given an opportunity to interview for these types of jobs. A name doesn't mean anything to what someone's uh, career experience or their education or their hobbies. It doesn't matter. You got to give people a chance, and I think with from a business perspective, as long as the work gets done, that's what we should be looking at. As long as the work gets done, if I can hire 10 people to get the work done, 5 of them are black, 5 of them are white, or any other ethnic group, we can get the work done. That is the goal, to get the work done for the company. And I
Mhm.
really do think that's one of the things we need to keep in perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really important that, you know, as these programs get cut or they get like, you know, kind of rolled back or minimized, it is important to still have these conversations, right? Because we've made a million times over the business case for DEIB, DEIA, however you want to phrase it. And you can make the business case all you want. And once you've got people that say that that's their hurdle, you know, that's great. But you're right, like it's this contraction of, okay, we were focused on this and now we're not. It can't, it stands a much smaller chance of continuing if everyone is vocal about no, because we haven't seen the things that we want to see yet. We've put all this time into it, and just because you haven't seen results yet, you are thinking, I mean, honestly, it kind of reminds me of like an orchard, right? Like you go, you plant this tree, you plant a seedling, and that thing is not going to bear fruit for years. Some of them take decades.
Yes.
Do you rip up that tree 3 years in and say, well, that one's a dud, let's start another one and try again? Or do you recognize that the thing that you're trying to build takes time to come to
Great
fruition?
analogy. Great
Yeah,
analogy.
every so often, man. Tyler, actually, Tyler White is in the comment section asking, what is the main concept to retain when navigating spaces where you're the only? I love this question. I've done it as a woman, but your opinion is much more valuable here. Obviously, people came to talk to you. What do you think is the main thing that people should focus on?
I think from the workplace perspective, one of the things we should focus on is being part of a team. I noticed for myself, it was starting to be easy for me to pull away because I was different and I held my own biases against this team of people that I didn't think would get me. So I think being part of the team would help considerably. Even if they feel like they don't want you in the team, go there anyway, be there anyway. Make sure that you are there and ready and equipped to do the job, and just hang in there. Hang in there if you're the only. Make sure you have someone to talk to about your experience. Don't let yourself or your mental health suffer because you feel like you're in an oppressed environment or anything like that. Um, Try to have those conversations if you can with your superior. I know it's difficult to do that, but if they're willing to have those types of conversations, it would be great if you did that. But I really, really want to stress not to let your mental health suffer because of the oppression, because
Mm-hmm.
you're holding all of that in and trying to navigate and figure out what am I supposed to do. These people don't seem like they like me too much. They didn't invite me to the bar after work, things like that. Try not to let it get to you.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, I remember working in manufacturing facilities and the guys would go out to a bar after work, or I remember several times where they were like, oh yeah, we went to a wrestling match. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. And I get that it's not like a work sanctioned activity, but A, you could have invited me, and B, like, why don't we go do stuff that maybe somebody else would want to do? Like, what, is there a problem with like everybody going out to dinner instead of we're going to go to this bar for, 3 hours? So I think this also kind of touches on the fact that if you are the only person in a room, it can feel like a lot of pressure, right? A ton of pressure to not only stay in that room, but to excel and make sure everyone accepts you in that room. So
Absolutely.
I love your focus on like maintaining your own mental health, and you make an effort to join in and speak up when you're left out because people don't know what they don't know until you say it.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like you have to prioritize your own mental health, especially if you know that you're not likely going to get that support from your employer. So I like that. Chantel Baylor had asked, how do you deal with microaggressions within the IT space? Have you had this happen to you recently? And if so, how did you handle it?
Well, I did. I did want to say, first of all, one of the ways I have dealt with stress in the workplace, I bought a damn it doll. And I would use the damn it doll to get rid of some stress. But seriously speaking, um, I worked in a hospital department. I was newly hired, and as usual, I was going to start some trouble. So what I
You are
did,
kind of people.
I noticed that all the women, and I was the only Black woman in the entire department, but I noticed the women were given soft skill things to do. Like, I don't want to talk against project management and product management and things like that. I don't want to speak against those, but I felt like more women should have been in the technical part of things, dealing with the servers and the desktops and understanding Windows and Linux and everything. So what I did, I put myself in a situation where they couldn't ignore me. And then the microaggressions started. So I had somebody tell me one time, can you get me some copies? Can you go grab me some coffee? Can you do, and with those types of things, me being who I am, I was able to fight against that pretty simply. But everyone doesn't feel comfortable doing that. So to deal with those microaggressions in IT is to frankly stand your ground. They can
Mhm.
microaggress all day, and don't let it get you down, because one of the things you need to understand is you know what you know what you know, and nobody can take that from you. You know how to do what you're supposed to do. Nobody can take that from you. And these are the things that the boldness and um, the strength that you need to be able to put on to be able to deal with the microaggressions. And you also need to, if given the opportunity, if you have to say something.
Mhm.
Again, this also goes to the same thing. Don't let it get you down. If you need to talk to someone about it, make sure you talk to someone about how you've been treated at your job, because it can get to be a lot. I'm an old warrior. I've done it for a while. So I can only tell you what I've done to go through it. But if you're new to it, it can be very stressful. So hang in there. Don't let them get you down. Talk to somebody if you need to, and just continue to get the job done.
I like that. I think you make a lot of really, really good points. And you're right, we got to prioritize our own like personal safety, psychological safety, your own mental health as well. And I think, especially I'm also not great at confrontation, right? Like it just does not come well to me. I never think of the things I want to say until like 8 weeks later in the shower or 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, I should have said that. That would have been the zinger. If you are like me and struggle with this, I'm going to give you a piece of advice from my mother. Love her. She's the absolute best. She calls it painting people into the nice corner. So when somebody says something out the side of their neck or out of pocket and you want to be like, I'm sorry, what? Um, this is what I usually do. I will say, oh my gosh, I know you didn't mean to sound blah, blah, blah. Can you explain what you meant by that? You are assuming best intent and telling them that you assume their best intent. And so that way, if they're gonna be jerks, they're gonna have to take a large step into that territory, which will be very visible to everyone else in the room around you. Or they're gonna play nice and say, "Oh no," and like kind of take it back or walk it back a little bit. It's not confrontational because you're like, "Oh, I'm sure you didn't mean that. Could you, specify?" You're giving them the benefit of the doubt, which they probably don't deserve, but still, we when they go high or when they go low, we go high. But yeah, like it's for me at least, it's worked really well when I did not feel like I could say like be like firm in the moment of like, don't say that to me. It for me at least, it's helped a lot. So hopefully it helps somebody else. All right. What advice would you give to people who are new to the working world? Young professionals, people from underrepresented groups who are trying to make a mark in whatever industry they're going into.
Well, the advice that I would give is, um, take your time and try not to be very overly anxious. It's different going into work and starting to do an 8 to 5 or a 9 to 5 and trying to figure out what they want you to do all day long. It can be very intimidating. But if you take your time uh, and watch out for the things that you're supposed to do, make sure you understand the tools you're supposed to use. Make sure you understand how to navigate your department, your team. Take your time doing those things. Feel comfortable filling out the organization. Understand the organization. Understand the business. Understand what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing, and that gives you a higher level of thinking so that you can continue to navigate yourself and your department. All of these departments are put together to work towards the business and the organization. So you want to know what you're supposed to do in the organization in order to make the organization thrive and become successful.
I like that. I think it's really easy, especially if you're starting out, to feel like you have a ton of ground to cover. You're already like, it feels like you're already behind, because at least I have felt like this in almost every job I've held, because I've changed industries, or I've whatever, port in a storm. So I'm very familiar with this feeling, and it can really feel like I am so far behind. I have so much to make up for, that you start focusing on stuff that's not the fundamentals or not the basics, because you're like, oh well, they assume I already know all that. And this is really, really good advice, because like, if you are secure and you know what you're supposed to be doing, and you know that you know how to do it, then it's much easier to make those stretch, kind of like stretch goals of, okay, I'm not good at this part, and this company seems to value that. So instead of worrying about, trying to get my feet under me, which I've already done now, you then have that bandwidth to say, okay, here's the things I want to work on. Or that, my training and my schooling did not prepare me for this side of the business. This is something I need to focus on. I like
And
this advice.
don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yes.
Ask
Louder, louder for the people
questions.
in the back.
Yes, please ask questions. Now, you might get a couple of stares, a couple of rolled eyes, with some whispering, but you ask the question so you could do the task correctly. That's all that matters. They can roll their eyes from here till kingdom come. It is what it is. You ask the question, and that is what is necessary. You got to ask questions.
Well, and people that act like that when you ask a question, like, those are not curious people. Those are not people that understand that you ask when you don't know because you want to know. Otherwise, you wouldn't bother. Um,
Exactly.
all right, we are out of time. I'm so sorry we weren't able to get to all of the questions, but Lori, thank you so much. It's been wonderful to get to learn from you and hear a little bit more about your experience. And I really hope we get to do this again soon.
Can I just leave my email address for
Please, yes, yes,
people
yes,
that want
please.
to? You can email me at lori@blackwomenintech.com, and we can continue our conversation.
Thank you so, so much, Lori. I cannot wait to see what more happens with Black women in tech. I will absolutely be keeping tabs on y'all and how you're doing. So thank you so, so much.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everybody.